You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Well, hey there, folks, and welcome to episode number 219 of the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. My name is Kevin O'Shea. I am a Canadian who loves to talk about Japan and talk to other people who are interested in Japan as well. And again, it's episode 219, and I am so happy you have joined us to listen, and we've got a fascinating conversation for this one. This is a great one indeed. I will be talking to Evan and Danny Benton of the Benton Homestead. They've got a fantastic YouTube channel, website about the things they're doing in Japan. They have purchased a couple of empty homes in Japan. They've renovated them. They've turned one into an Airbnb, another into a home. They are getting into agriculture, beekeeping. They're doing lots of fascinating projects on a small island in the Seto Inland Sea in Japan. And wow, what a great conversation we have. Very inspiring for a lot of you. I think you'll be very inspired to hear this, to hear the challenges, the adventures, the successes they've had to this point. And for me, this was a fantastic conversation because I'm constantly doing research in a way, because I do plan to buy a property in the next few years in Japan, and talking to people who've already done so, it's good for me. It's kind of like future business research. But yeah, let's jump into this episode. And by the way, of course, it has been a little while. The episodes of the Just Japan podcast are not coming out as often as they were for a while, but that's because life gets busy, as they say. But I'm happy to be still doing it, of course, and I'm happy that you're listening. So speaking of listening, let's all listen to my fantastic conversation with Danny and Evan Benton of the Benton Homestead. Welcome to the Just Japan podcast. I really appreciate you guys joining me. On this episode, I am here with Evan and Danny Benton from the Benton Guest House in Japan. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's really great to have you guys here. I've done 220 some episodes of this podcast, about 220 episodes, and this is the first time I'll be talking to people who have renovated homes and have kind of started, a business that kind of is connected with that. So, I was wondering if you could maybe just, give the listeners a little introduction, a little bit about who you are and where you are.
Sure. Well, right now we are physically inside our guest house here. This is Benton Guest House on Omishima Island in Ehime Prefecture, Japan. Omishima is part of the Shimanami Kaido, which is a series of 7 suspension bridges that run from Hiroshima Prefecture to Ehime Prefecture. And we are right about in the middle of that. It's a very popular area for bicyclists.
Okay.
And maybe you can take over.
So we're here on a business visa, which means that we started our own business. We actually incorporated a business, and we had to fund it with a certain amount from our own pockets that we were able to finance by selling our home back in the States. And our business is doing this guest house as an Airbnb and also agriculture. Farming. So we're focusing on honeybees right now, and also other vegetables and things. And we're trying to do that in regenerative or sustainable, natural kind of, all of the above with that. And we hope to be able to offer classes and hands-on experience for people coming to learn about that in the future.
Cool. Wonderful. These are all things that speak to me. I do have another podcast, not this one, but I have one called the Nature Talks podcast, which is all about environmental education, which is my 9-to-5 job. And not the podcasting part, but I podcast about what I do. And I love all that stuff so much. And I can't wait to talk to you guys about that. So so you're both from the United States. You're in Japan, and I guess I'm wondering, how did that happen? How did you get to Japan? I guess every person I talk to has obviously very different stories, different trajectories. For some people, they decided to come as an English teacher and they never left. In my case, I met my Japanese spouse while I was teaching in South Korea, and then never planned that. Ended up in Japan. How did you guys find yourselves in Japan? I believe from what I've seen on your YouTube channel, you were in Mexico as well. But how did Japan happen?
Well, I did the English teacher thing back in 2006. So back when it was the year right before Nova went bankrupt. If you remember that was sort of
I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was when it was really easy to become an English teacher here. And I came here actually in 1998 with a high school trip. And so that was my first experience with the culture. And I just really enjoyed learning languages. And so the only languages that our school offered was Spanish and French. So when I went to college, I decided to study Japanese really arbitrarily because it was the first country I had visited.
Okay.
And I always wanted to, during high school, I always wanted to be an exchange student, but I never had that opportunity. So after college, I took a year and studied, or I took a year and worked in Japan. And I didn't think I would love it as much as I did, but I really didn't want to leave. But I had it in my mind that I was only going to be here for a year. Okay. So when I got back and started working in the United States, I pretty much immediately tried to get back. I actually got a job lined up in the Tohoku area in 2011, right when the
oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so and I was going to be working there, but they stopped the hiring process because of that terrible disaster up there. Mm-hmm. But I always had it in the back of my mind that I just love Japan. We ended up in New Orleans from Portland, and we loved New Orleans. But we just, when we were there in New Orleans, we found ourselves really gravitating towards like country living. We started getting chickens and bees and just spending a lot more time outdoors.
Okay.
And we decided that we wanted to live in the countryside. We were living on the outskirts of New Orleans, so we were trying to sort of we were doing an urban farm, is what we called it.
We bought the empty lot next door, so we had a quarter of an acre.
Okay.
And there's a lot of if you start watching YouTube and about farming and what you can do on small spaces. A quarter of an acre is about the minimum of what you need to do things, but it's amazing what you can do on a quarter of an acre. So we really pushed ourselves to do as much as we could and learn as much as we could for like maximizing output from a small space. And neither one of us have a farming background. We both grew up in the same rural, small town, Oregon town. But we weren't really, we didn't have any experience with that until we moved to New Orleans, and we're pretty much self-taught just from watching YouTube and reading books and learning as we went.
Cool, that's fantastic. It's amazing how many people these days and how much you can learn from YouTube. I've been an avid gardener for years and years, and I run a program at my school where I have a kitchen garden. I run with primary school students, and I'm still always leaning on YouTube, especially Joe Gardner, Joe Lample. He's the Joe Gardner podcast. I'm a big fan of him. I've learned so much. He's kind of like a mentor I've never met in person. But that is so cool. And so now you're in Japan, and on your YouTube channel, you talk a lot about the process of, you talk very well about the process of how you got there. Now the word I want to share, and it's a word that's popping up more and more, kind of in the Japan, how shall I say, the Japan enthusiast zeitgeist, is Akia. So I was wondering if you could, for those who may not know, what is an Akia, and how did you guys get interested in purchasing one and then two?
You're absolutely correct. It's definitely a buzzword right now. And I guess the word, Akia, the word just means vacant house. Yeah. But it comes with I don't speak Japanese very well, but I read that it comes with the connotation that it has been abandoned for some time, but technically it just means abandoned or empty or vacant house. And what got us interested in it was back in New Orleans when we were deciding where we wanted to go. We were ready to find a new place. We really love New Orleans, and we're looking at the housing market and realizing that while the housing market was going crazy and everybody was selling and buying new places or buying bigger places, we were like, well, what if we sold our house and took that profit and used it to start a business somewhere else instead of just reinvesting in the United States? Because we could make a fair amount of savings, but it wouldn't be enough to do anything in the U.S. However, it might be in Mexico or in Japan. So that's what really got us looking globally. And I won't go into, what got us settled on one of those two countries, because that was a whole long process. And then our whole exploration through Mexico was 15 months. And then while we were there, we were waiting for Japan's borders to open because they were closed at that time. So while we were in Mexico, we were working towards either getting the visa or the doors were going to open for tourists. And we ended up doing both of that. So while we were in Mexico, we were working towards getting the startup visa and also looking at houses, to bring it back to the Akia question. Yeah. So we were looking at houses in Japan from back in the US before we even left. And actually, one of the two houses that we bought, we saw online in 2021 before we left the US. Okay. And it's still available when we arrived here in Japan in 2023. So there's it was very serendipitous. I feel like that house was still available.
I actually was just watching a video of yours today, which you put up 3 months ago, called "Abandoned House to Airbnb: Process, Expense, Return on Investment, IKEA to Guest House, and Japan Data." And it was an incredibly thorough video. And I believe in that video you mentioned that you saw that house on Cheap Houses Japan. Am I correct?
Yes. The other house, though.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, basically. So this house, the house that's our guest house, was abandoned for 10 years, and the house that we saw online and Evan fell in love with in 2021 was abandoned for 40 years. So it needs
40.
It needs a lot more work. Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. And I've been watching this process. I'm a little late to the party maybe on the Benton Homestead YouTube channel, but I'm absolutely eating it up, and I'm really enjoying the content that you guys have there. And that's a hint to all of you listeners. The links will be in the show notes, and go out there and please subscribe, because you can find so much more detail about the processes that you guys went through. But here's, I guess that answers my question. I was going to ask why Omishima. But I there's so many places in Japan where you could live. And I mean, it's there's literally millions of abandoned houses that are often, many of them for sale around Japan. So was it that house specifically that drew you to that island? Was there more?
Well, initially, yeah, it was this house. I mean, I was trying to tell Danny, since I have lived in Japan, I was trying to tell her that there's just so many beautiful parts of Japan. And we were thinking of coming here and trying to do a real thorough look for our ideal, place to live. And I said, gosh, Danny, that'll take a couple of years if you really wanted to do that. And I mean, I was trying to convince her, like, literally, if you just threw a dart, at the map and randomly found a place, you would find places you loved, within a little radius there. But essentially, one of the big requirements we had was climate. So New Orleans is a very hot, almost tropical place. And Oregon, where we were from, is it's not freezing. It does freeze there, but it's not as cold as a place like the Midwest, but it gets pretty gloomy and dark during the winter. And so we found that, we really enjoyed the hotter climates and we wanted something more like that. So that was we made a list of all these requirements. That was a big one, though, the climate here and tourism, because the Airbnb in New Orleans was so successful for us. And then also we were looking at places that offered the startup visa. So that's not offered by the national government of Japan. That's offered by the local municipalities. Some prefectures and some cities offer a startup visa, which is basically just a short 6-month to 1 year visa that is like a prep for the business visa. We're getting you your licenses and whatnot. Because a business visa basically depends on the funding that I mentioned, but you're also coming up with like a business plan. So we had to come up with that business plan and also come up with like the licenses and potential customers and that kind of data that we could give. And then our city, Imabari City, like gets all that together and like essentially sponsors us or writes us a letter of recommendation that we take to immigration. Anyway, we came up with a list of, in addition to the house, it was climate, tourism, and the startup visa availability were our 3 big criteria. And
that narrowed it down to pretty much 2 places.
Yeah, two places. Imabari City here, and then Oita Prefecture, which is on Kyushu, northern Kyushu. And so what I did was once we had narrowed it down to those 2 places, I wrote to every little government body I could find, and to see what kind of response I would get. And Oita Prefecture, and actually broadened my scope out a little bit to see if there were any more. I think I wrote to every like town in like southern Kyushu, as well as this part of Ehime Prefecture in Shikoku. And just to see what kind of response I got. And Oita Prefecture, since I mentioned that honeybees was one of the things we were thinking about doing, the guy who wrote back to me at Oita Prefecture actually said there are no flowers in Oita, and so we couldn't do bees there.
What? Okay.
Yeah. But
basically, Imabari they were overwhelmingly very welcoming from as soon as we wrote to them. They set up a Zoom call with like
13 people. Yeah, like within a week.
Yeah.
So Imabari City they've been very happy to have us, and it was really heartwarming when we first reached out to them, and that was another really big just draw was just the way that the government officials that we interacted with, the way that we treated us just from the get-go was really very welcoming.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I find very fascinating. I have this conversation often with my wife about the the future plans, my post-teaching career plans, and moving back to Japan and retiring in Japan and these kind of things, and hopefully moving back to Japan before I retire. And, I'm always constantly showing her different houses and ideas and stuff of moving to kind of more rural areas. We were kind of looking more towards Hyogo or Osaka Prefecture because she's from Osaka. Her family's still there. So we'd want to be somewhat relatively close. But, tourism is one thing we talk about. We need to be somewhere where there's tourism kind of for my ideas. But, she's also often made the comment that some small towns, some municipalities are definitely not welcoming of outsiders. I think one of the things from listening to many episodes of the Seek Sustainable Japan podcast with JJ Walsh is that a lot of the success stories I hear on that podcast, and you guys were also on that podcast, there are definitely cities, municipalities out there that are welcoming, and I guess that's the key is to find those places where they're kind of welcoming with open arms, people coming in to kind of repopulate, resettle, and kind of boost the economy up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories of that too, about people not feeling welcomed in the rural areas, but it just hasn't been our experience at all. And we've actually talked about that and thinking like, why is that? Why has Omishima and Imabari City and just this whole area felt so welcoming to us? And it's possible it's just because it's even though it has the benefits of being in the countryside, seaside, really rural living, there's a population of 4,000 on our island. It also is, it's a thoroughfare for Japanese and foreign tourists riding their bicycling across the bridges. So possibly it's because, they're used to people traveling through, they're used to seeing foreigners, even though it is such a small village.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think that definitely that would make sense. I mean, if they're used to having so many tourists coming through, I guess they're happy to have people there who are setting up more infrastructure that's going to benefit that. I guess you've already mentioned about the visas, which is really interesting. One thing that kind of crosses my mind sometimes, or when I talk to people, and I think there was somewhere in a video I watched, Danny, where you had mentioned this, where just owning a property in Japan doesn't mean you get yourself a visa. And I think there's a lot of people who maybe have, how shall I say, not well-planned aspirations of buying an older home in Japan, not realizing that you can't just move to Japan because you own a home, but you do need a visa. So did you guys find that process like really challenging, or did you get lots of support from that really welcoming municipality?
Oh, I would say both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really challenging, but we have just had support every step of the way.
Oh, okay.
From Imabari City offering the startup visa to our immigration lawyer, and we have a business consultant and an accountant.
Oh, okay.
And so Imabari City helped us sort of assemble this team that has been helping us beyond just the startup visa process to now, we're almost halfway through our business manager visa first year. And we have this little team of professionals that's helping us.
Well, that's very cool. It's really neat to have that support network. And now you're branching out and you're doing, I guess it was all part of your bigger plan. And I watched one video recently where you were kind of zipping around in the car or truck. I'm not sure what you guys drive, but showing your two, your guest house, your residence, but then all these different fields that you have where I saw the 2 bee yards and I saw some other fields. So how did that happen too? Like, I'm curious about getting those properties, like for the bee yard or for different places where you plan on having some agriculture happening. How did you connect with those plots of land?
Different ways. I think you can cover this one.
So our contractor, one of those places is ours, our property, and one other place we are officially leasing, as in we have a contract, and it's for 0 yen to rent this lady's land, and that was through a mutual friend that connected it to us, connected her to us. And then the other, I think, 3 fields that we're working on right now, it was literally the contractor that we hired to work on this place here. He drove me around in his K-Truck and he said, "Hey, this is my property. You can work this land." And he said, like, for example, that's my this is my lemon orchard too. Somebody runs that for me, and he just pays me in lemons. So he just literally drove me all around the island and said, "That's mine. You can use it. That's mine. You can use it. That's mine. You can use it for $0 for 0 yen." And the only thing is that he's not a farmer himself, so all of these properties have major issues, mainly with access. The big field that we're working on now hasn't been, he said, 10 or 20 years, and it's a former rice paddy. So the main thing I've been working on there is just digging some ditches and getting the drainage situation figured out there. But yeah, basically, as soon as we got here and we just started asking around, people said, we were just surrounded by vacant farmland.
For example, the woman that we are officially leasing one of our honeybee yards from, she was a friend of a friend that we met here, and she said she had something like over a dozen properties. Yeah. And she was really excited to have us there. because her husband didn't want to weed whack anymore. He doesn't want to.
Yeah.
They have their own extensive garden, and they were feeling burdened with the amount of farmland that they have.
That was another thing too, is when we met her, which was almost a year ago now, that was another thing where she drove around with us and showed us all of her, she has a lot of orange groves, and her story is that she was born here on Omishima, but she moved to Osaka. Okay. So her parents were the big farmers, and when they passed away, she just kind of comes back and forth. She has like a little log cabin that she lives in, but she's in Osaka most of the time, and her children live in Osaka. So she just said, yeah, if in the future you want to take on this stuff, there's that too. But so she does have a big garden of her own where she's kept it tilled and nice, and so she said I could use that too. And I've been planting a lot of stuff there because it's ready to go basically in comparison to other stuff that I've been working on. But where our bee yard is on a terrace, and right above it is just overgrown forest land. And so she says, yeah, that guy, I don't know, you can do whatever you want up there. And then below it is another terrace of it is farmland, but it's all overgrown. The trees are like 20 feet tall. And she said, yeah, that guy, he's passed away, so you can do whatever you want there. So we're really spoiled for choice with that kind of thing. And it's it sounds
that's amazing. That you have all those opportunities. I suppose, for a lot of people, they're just happy if someone's using it, right?
We would be, to be honest, we would love more people to move here and join us, because it's far too much for.
There's so much land, and the thing is that it's, we're restoring old houses, but the land needs restoration as well. So even though these people have been doing everything they can to maintain the land, when you're not working it actively, there's only so much you can do. And so we're every piece of land that we use, which we have five fields, it's 3 vegetable fields and 2 bee yards. And each one of them it's not just building the infrastructure that we need, but it's like rebuilding the land itself. So if you can imagine that, abandoned farmland needs more work than regular land.
Yeah, and just the ecology of it too. There's a big wild dog problem here, and there's a wild boar population. There's a wild boar problem everywhere in Japan, so that's pretty well known. But just because there's so much habitat for them, nature abhors a vacuum, so they are just coming in and filling in these spaces. Our house is, there's a big forest now right next to our guest house here, and that's where the dogs live, and they sort of roam between there and the solar power fields, So, and we are working with a local dog rescue to get homes for some of them. But yeah, just to kind of paint a picture, like when the civilization starts sort of receding from its high water mark, we find these these issues with other species coming in to fill the voids.
Yeah. No, it's as cheesy as it sounds, I always think of like Jurassic Park, and when that character says, life finds a way, right? And it does. It really does. Jeff Goldblum said that, and it really does. That's one of the things that interestingly enough, the learning curve I'm dealing with. It's my first year living here in Malaysia, and I teach at an international school, and I'm apparently the first teacher. This is what the maintenance staff who've been working here for many, many years that have told me, that I'm the first teacher they've met in a long time who's like really passionate about gardening and kind of small scale farming. And I live in an apartment. I just have a balcony that gets like an hour of sunlight a day. But now I've got this big playground at school. I've got this giant, and I asked for garden beds, and they just build me raised garden beds, and it's just like, yes. But now I'm dealing with things I've never dealt with. We have all kinds of monkeys here. We have these lovely, cute, adorable monkeys that are called dusky leaf monkeys, and they leave everything alone. But we've also got macaques like you'd find in Japan. And they ravaged my tomato beds. They waited until all my tomatoes started to grow, and then each morning I'd come to school and find tomatoes laying on the ground with bites out of them and half of it gone. And so it's now I'm in the process of growing more tomatoes, but I've got to figure out how to try to monkey proof that area of my garden. So I suppose things that you have to, combat are, and I think I saw in some videos that you had posted on your YouTube channel, you'd mentioned like the wild boar fencing and things like that. And I suppose those are things that maybe in the past didn't have to be there, but they have to be there now.
Right.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the bees, because I do have a little bit of a background in beekeeping. Not a lot, but I did work at a school where we had a beekeeping program, and we had beehives on the roof of our school. And, I got to dabble in that for a while, and I really enjoyed it. So what are your, I know that you, once you moved in, you bought a bunch of beehives. What are your plans for the bees? I'm curious, as a former beekeeper myself.
Well, actually, the beekeeping, we hope to be the biggest part of our business.
Okay.
We did the guest house first because that is sort of an easier sell to for the visa process.
Okay, gotcha.
It's easier to get started and show that, because we have to demonstrate in order for our visa to be renewed that we have a sustainable business, a means to support ourselves here in Japan. And so getting the guest house started first is our way of doing that.
Okay.
So we did the house remodel within the 6 month time period of the startup visa. Mm-hmm. And then before we applied for the business manager visa, we actually had our first guest stay, so we could demonstrate to the Japanese government that we had our first income source prior to applying for the business manager visa. So then as soon as that happened, that was in wintertime. And then we had already been making preparations to start our real focus, which is on the bees, this spring. And so we're just hoping, we're starting with 10 hives, and we're hoping to at least double that every year for the first few years. And our main goal is actually the farming and the honeybees, and then the guest house will be just supporting an additional part of our business, and maybe it'll help us get into like agritourism down the road.
Mm. Well, that's one of the things that I often think about. And I guess in a way, having wonderful guests like you on the podcast, I'm kind of doing my own research in a way. But what are the opportunities that you foresee, obviously not just in your area, but in other parts of Japan, for those expats or for those non-Japanese who are interested in that slower life or are interested in moving to Japan and doing something? What kind of opportunities do you think may present themselves for those folks in those kind of more rural areas, as far as like businesses go, or becoming parts of that community?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that there is no lack of houses that need restored here, but you would have to be careful to make sure that you restore. If your plan is to have a guest house, it can't be too far off the beaten path in order for that to be an actual sustainable business to live off of and to base your visa off of. But when we were drafting our business plan, our business consultant came up with a lot of really good numbers for us about honey production, in particular, how little honey that Japan consumes is actually from Japan, and how they import a staggering amount of their honey. And it seems to me that, the average age of a farmer in Japan is 70 or over 70.
Yeah.
And a lot of the younger farmers who are sort of realizing that there needs to be younger farmers are focusing more on the natural farming and that sort of thing. So as much attention as we've been paying to, farming in Japan and what's on the horizon, it really seems like there is a pretty big movement for using less pesticides, going the natural way, and that sort of thing. And I think that will lead sort of to a shift in Japan as a whole. as far as looking for those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I guess while using the agriculture business for our visa did add some challenges, I think that if someone's interested in that, it is a good route, and it's working for us so far.
I just think that the number of farmers, I mean, if you've looked at all into the statistics and the demographics, surrounding farmers, globally, the number of farmers is shrinking at an alarming pace. So, even if you're not interested in growing food to sell it, if you're interested in eating food, there's a lot of concern coming down the pipe towards us. And Japan in particular, the economy is relatively isolated actually from the world. So we don't get a lot of like in the United States, we get a lot of produce from Mexico and stuff.
Yeah.
And Japan definitely imports the majority of its like wheat and corn and probably like vegetable oils and like industrial things like that. But in terms of produce, it's all produced, or a very large proportion of it is produced locally. And one thing that I've found that I would not have expected is that, yes, Japan is a very regulatory heavy country, but we found some avenues for selling our produce that sort of like skirts some of that those regulations. So they do have a very robust infrastructure in place around getting produce from the local farmers to the local consumers, and I don't think people are aware of that, in the rest of the world. So the whole farmers market thing that we have in the United States there's not as big of a thing here, because it's already just people go to the grocery store and they can get it. You can get local produce just from your local grocery store. So anything, but yeah, the average age of a farmer is 75 or so. So, gosh, do the math there. You can't lose really producing anything, right? It's all going to need to be replaced. Like the whole infrastructure is going to need to be replaced in the next 5 to 10 years, like please, get working on it. One thing to add about that I would not have thought of until I moved here is I asked a local farmer on Omishima for advice about specifically what vegetables we should grow. And he basically said, you are a foreigner, so grow vegetables that foreigners want, because you're going to know about that more than we do as a Japanese, So we've got the Japanese vegetables on lockdown. In other words, you go ahead and grow whatever you think your people would want, And so I was a little bit taken aback by that. But one thing is that one of the main sales avenues that he uses is online and mail order. So so we're not have to worry about there's plenty of foreign bicycle tourists here, but I'm not so sure that they'd want to buy like I don't know,
a bag of carrots or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Parsnips. I'm growing parsnips and beets. I'm not sure that they'd want to take that to their hotel and cook it up, but but Japan is the type of country where just the shipping is so great here that the postal service and anyway, it's so easy to get them from one end of the country to the other. And it's a country where, geographically, it's like you have like Tokyo and Osaka and Kobe being right there. It's like having New York and Chicago and LA, like all within a few hours of each other, So the market, as a farmer, the market for any kind of like niche or specialty goods you might want to produce it's absolutely there, and that would be, I think, what you want to target. Another thing is there's a wild boar group on the island that hunts wild boar.
Okay, yeah.
And ships them, and they're all Japanese, but they ship in, like same day, and they actually will show you like pictures of the actual animal that you can buy. And so they're, of course, most of their customers are restaurants, but so high-end produce and things like that.
That's so neat. A lot of things to unpack there, and that's really neat. I mean, I think about, I left Japan. We moved back in 2017. We left Japan and moved to Beijing, and not that long beforehand, maybe a couple of years before that, maybe 2015 or so, there was the Eat Local Kobe Farmers Market started appearing in a park by City Hall in Kobe, and that became more and more popular. And one of the movements, the whole farm to table movement, was really starting to kind of take hold in Kobe, and the municipality, the city of Kobe, was really promoting it and doing a lot to promote it. And I was a volunteer, kind of tourism ambassador, like social media tourism ambassador, basically taking lots of photos and stuff, for social media back when social media wasn't so big in Japan, and promoting this. And I've been really enjoying watching this farm to table movement, which is happening, kind of a movement with a lot of younger Japanese people who are walking away from the city, leaving their corporate jobs, and buying farms in, say, like Kita Kobe and different parts of Kobe and like kind of rural areas. And there's a real neat kind of movement happening. And I follow a lot of farmers on Instagram, and I think obviously social media is creating a whole new space for people doing what you are doing and what you will be doing. So it's, I guess, a kind of a new and exciting time to be farming if you're getting into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Farming, and it's exciting.
It is. But like, oh yeah, I freaking geek out on this stuff. Like, because again, I'm just so passionate about growing food, especially with children. I actually just spent time at a conference in Thailand doing presentations for international school teachers around Asia about farming, growing food with children, and encouraging them, connecting them with the land, with nature at a young age, showing them where food comes from. And I'm super excited. I'm new at the school I'm at, but now I've got, I had meetings with the kitchen staff, the cafeteria staff, and they're like, all right, we want this. We want you to grow Thai basil. We want you to grow bok choy. Can you do this and that? So I'm like, well, I can grow some for you, but my space is quite limited. But there's nothing that excites me and warms me so much than seeing like the cooks from my school cafeteria coming out to like the garden and harvesting basil and then going back in and cooking with it and then feeding that to the students. Like that's
so cool. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. It is amazing. I mean, like I'm hired as a grade 2 teacher. That's like the kind of main role I have. I'm a grade 2 teacher. But every break I have, I'm out there. Every lunchtime, after school, every Saturday and Sunday, I'm in that garden, and it's so neat for me to see kind of come to fruition like that. And I'm hoping myself that maybe in a few years I'll be doing something similar to that, maybe, or something like that in Japan. But yeah. Well, that's so cool. Now, I mean, oh wow, that's this stuff excites me a lot. I'm curious. Just again, I mentioned earlier on in the podcast about this kind of the IKEA word being in the zeitgeist, and so many people getting so excited about this. And there's, in a video I saw you mention the Cheap Houses Japan. I follow them on Instagram. It's a fantastic feed, and there are so many similar Instagram feeds now that are all about buying houses. What would you say for those who are listening who are thinking, I want to get an older home or a cheap home or a really, really cheap home in Japan? What are some of the pitfalls that you think some people maybe could find themselves dealing with if they don't do their due diligence?
Well, I would say there's a lot of pros, and there could potentially be a lot of cons. This house that we're in right now for our guest house, I like to be as just open about everything as possible, because when we were just starting out, it was very hard to find information from other people who had done what we had done or how to do this. So I'm really trying to just share as much of our process as possible. So this guest house was listed for 1 million yen, which at that time was about $7,500 US. And including realtor's fees, it was about $9,000 total for the house to purchase it. But we chose this house very carefully, and there was no structural issues. There was no roof issues. Everything that we did to this house was cosmetic.
Okay.
So it would be, one of the biggest pitfalls would be, well, I'm going to buy a super cheap house, but then it needs an entirely new roof, or it had termite damage, or, water damage that needed extensive repairs. There's a lot of things that could go wrong with an old house, but the very affordable ones that don't have those issues are also out there to find.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But that's like right there. I just want, there's one thing I was actually I have a 14-year-old son, and I was talking to him about this the other day, about this whole kind of thing. So how did you guys avoid walking into a house that had those major structural problems? How were you able to find out that the house didn't have, a major leaking roof or, cracked support beams? Did you actually hire or bring in someone like a carpenter or someone who had an understanding of that to look at the house first?
First of all, no. At this price point, you're not going to get any kind of inspection. Whatever you're gonna get if you're buying a house for $7,000 is going to be, what you see is what you get. So you have to have some confidence in your ability to assess those types of things. And the number one thing you're probably going to look for is termites. The number two thing you're going to look for is drainage. For a lot of different reasons. You want to make sure there's not water building up around the property. And then, number three I would say is going to be the roof. We did have a few roof problems.
We had some tiny leaks in this house.
But basically the way it worked for us is we actually kind of had a contractor worked into the purchase price, So we had it was expected that we're gonna spend X amount on the house, and then we're gonna spend Y amount on this contractor. And the contractor, it's a small island. He is famous on the island. He's
the only game in town, kind of thing.
Well, one of very few games in town for sure. Okay. He was a friend of the seller too. Okay. And he was a friend of the realtor too. I mean, he is a really good guy.
He's a friend. He's a friend of everybody.
And like I mentioned before, he's now also our landlord with the farms.
Yeah.
Fields. So, but we had to kind of trust his. We had to take his word for it with a lot of things. So that's going to be something that if you're going to work with one of these small towns like that, you're also going to have to be aware of. Is you're going to have to find a trustworthy person. And Japan is a very high trust society, so that's partly why we're here. Why I love Japan is because shared values and you can trust people in general. We don't lock our car. We leave the key in the ignition. We don't lock the front door. It's like that. It's like Mayberry. But in terms of buying a house and getting the work done, you either have to have experience doing that, which we have some from doing it on our own, or if you're trusting a professional, you've got to be able to trust that professional. And we did try, and we were just helping a guy. We were actually just helping a couple buy a lot here on Omishima from America to build their own house.
Okay.
As a retirement house, and the husband is a former contractor, and so we actually had a long conversation about how he says that inspection is sort of a scam, but so you don't have to worry about that, I guess, at least if you're buying a house here in Japan at this price point. But you've got to be able to evaluate it on your own and take that. You've got to be comfortable with that level of risk. You know what I mean? And the good thing about the Japanese houses, the way they're constructed, is you pretty much can figure out how they're built just by looking at them, Mm-hmm. And another thing is earthquakes. If a house is this old, it's been through at least one major earthquake, and if it's stood that test, it's probably gonna stand another one, Mm-hmm. But there's not a lot of parallel lines. You know what I mean? As in sort of everything's a little bit wonky. Okay. So but you can tell by looking at that, and it just means if you know that one end of a room is 3 meters, the other end might not be 3 meters when you're measuring stuff like that, Okay. But you can basically lift up the tatami. You can see, that board goes there and it needs to be replaced, and so on and so forth. So that part's pretty easy. But it's also difficult to get tools here. Not hand tools. The hand tools are amazing. But like I had a real hard time finding a table saw that I was just able to purchase. So like bigger, the sort of like American, like
stuff you can go to Home Depot and pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for us, it's just because it's the added difficulty of being on a small island. So we try to shop as locally as possible, and online shopping is just an absolute last resort. So when he says it's hard to find tools, it's like not that Japan doesn't have good tools. It's just that we're on a little island.
Yeah, if you're in Kobe, you could go to Konan Home Center and get that, but you're not in Kobe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like we had a weird thing. We were trying to find a chainsaw, and we went into a store that was just, Florida Raptors chainsaws, and they were all electric. And I went up to the guy and I said, "Hey, do you have any gas powered chainsaws?" He said, "No, this whole store is just electric tools."
Oh,
and there's trimmers, and so there's different kind of trends here.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
But we've gotten some good tools. Well, not only both houses have come with a lot of tools in the garages. That's another benefit of the abandoned houses. Some might call that not a benefit, but we are putting a lot of the things that were left behind to good use. Almost all the tools that we're using, besides some of the specialty things that we've had to purchase, were here and ready to use.
That's fantastic. There's so much, and that's one of the things I love about watching your videos, especially when you first moved into those houses and took possession of them. There's so much neat stuff. Like just literally, they are treasure troves of artifacts from the past. Which is something for all of you listening. Go and check out Benton Homestead on YouTube, and you can see this treasure troves. Yeah, wow. I don't want to keep you guys much longer. I know you guys, it's evening there and whatnot. But I'm wondering where can people find your stuff online? And there's a lot, and I'll put all the links in the show notes. But where when they want to find out and watch and see with their own eyes all the ththings we're talking about, where are the best places for them to go?
Well, on our website, bentonhomestead.com, that sort of is my hub where I put everything there, so everything else is easy to find. So the main two pages would be just our website, bentonhomestead.com, that has my photo blog, and I do a lot of like long form blog writing there as well as photos. So I do a lot of my like detailed step-by-step visa process, incorporating business process, that sort of thing can be found on the website. And then the other main one is, of course, YouTube. So we are Benton Homestead on YouTube.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And the smaller channels would just be Instagram and Facebook. And then coming soon, we're going to have a vintage shop available online.
Oh, neat. Very cool. Very cool. So go and follow those places, everyone listening, and I'll put all those links in the show notes. And again, I know that bentonhomestead.com and your blog there and the YouTube, I think combined, you post so much detailed information. You are now one of those sources that you talked about that you didn't have in the past that you could really refer to and lean on. So I definitely, when I think about my future, I think maybe for me, the visas will be different. It'll be a bit easier because I qualify for a spousal visa and whatnot. But the whole process of going through and buying the houses and you put down, you share a lot of the money and the budgets, and that's really fantastic, I think. And that's really going to help a lot of people.
Thanks. I hope so. I really hope so.
Yeah. That's great. So, Danny and Evan, thank you so much for taking time to join us here on the Just Japan podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's been really nice hearing your story as well. We listened to a bunch of your other episodes.
Oh, great.
Before.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, that was such a wonderful conversation. I learned so much from chatting with Evan and Danny of Benton Homestead. And I just want to thank them so much for taking the time to come on the Just Japan podcast. And I'm sure you guys enjoyed that conversation. Now, of course, you can go to bentonhomestead.com to find out all the links to the things we were talking about today. They've got such a great exhaustive exhaustive just resource of information about purchasing and renovating empty homes in Japan, Akia. Of course, you can also follow Danny and Evan over on YouTube, over on Instagram and Facebook at Benton Homestead. And there you can find, of course, the links on their website to their Airbnb, their Etsy shop, all that cool stuff. And there's so much there to follow. So go follow them, go subscribe to their YouTube channel, go follow them on Insta and Facebook and all those places. And I'm looking forward to having them again on in the future to find out how things are progressing with their beekeeping. As I'm recording this on Sunday, I just saw on their Instagram that they just had their first successful honey harvest, which is really exciting, and that is so cool. So again, thanks to them for coming on the podcast. So as for me, it is now June. We are here in Malaysia. We're going to be spending the summer here in Penang, Malaysia, and we've got lots of different projects on the go. I am planning on doing a lot of things. We've got a couple of months off. Our summer holiday is a bit longer than normal because there are some pretty big, wide-scale renovations going on with facilities at my international school here in Penang, and they're basically going to be kind of knocking out walls and making classrooms bigger and really kind of improving the overall infrastructure of the school. So that's exciting. Gives us a little bit more time for summer holiday. One thing I'm planning on doing, for those of you who follow me on social media, who follow me on X and follow me on the Just Japan Podcast Facebook page and other places, you'll know that I'm an avid gardener. But one thing I am is an avid kind of I'm an environmental educator, sustainability educator at school. I'm also a primary school teacher. But one thing I love to do is connect children with the earth, with nature, with gardening, with food, teaching them the kind of whole farm to table process, where food comes from. I'm also kind of growing, pardon the pun, a gardening program at my school where we are growing food for our cafeteria to be used so students can eat it, so staff can eat it. I'm growing things in a large herb garden, so we can use that. Students can use it, and staff at my school can, air quotes, raid the garden whenever they want to get herbs to collect them to bring them home for their own cooking. And I'm thinking, I'm kind of getting relatively well known for this on LinkedIn. So I am very active on LinkedIn, but not about Japan stuff. That's more about kind of professional things, my teaching, my environmental education stuff that I do, the Nature Talks podcast, which I host, which is another podcast. And I'm thinking, and I think I could definitely make it happen. I'll have the time to write a book about gardening at school, in schools, as an important piece of sustainability education, as a way of taking climate action, kind of a miniature farm to table urban farming in schools. And that's, I think, a book I'm going to put together this summer. And then, I'll, of course, share with you guys this kind of project. If you're interested in gardening and kind of urban agriculture, maybe you'll be interested in it as well. So this is something I've been planning for a while, but a lot of people professionally have been kind of pushing me to do this, and I should say encouraging me. And I think I'll have the time this summer, probably get up each morning and spend an hour or so writing each day, or a little bit more. And it's not going to be War and Peace, not an epic novel, but kind of a bit of a how-to guide for educators and maybe families and stuff like that about how to get kids gardening. And how about to set up a small scale kind of food farm at school, that kind of thing. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's it for me for another episode of the Just Japan podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know, again, I certainly enjoy talking to Evan and Danny. Again, go follow all their links. Go help out the Just Japan podcast. Please give us a rating and a review in Apple Podcasts and Spotify, wherever you listen to us, Amazon Music, all of those cool places. Go follow me on Twitter at MadForMaple. Of course, the links are all below. Go join the Facebook group, facebook.com/justjapanstuff. There's quite a few new people have come over recently, and thank you so much. It's really great seeing you over there. I'm active there every day. I'm posting pictures of Japan and pictures of here, pictures of things I'm up to. One interesting thing that you guys may see, and if you follow me there, I am now really active in an arm wrestling club here on Penang Island in Malaysia. Never thought I would become an arm wrestler at 48 years of age, but I am, and I'm really enjoying it. It's something I do with my son. Every Saturday we spend the afternoon sparring with an arm wrestling club, and then throughout the week I spend 4 or 5 days in the gym training to make myself I guess, stronger to be a better arm wrestler. Because and I'm a newbie. I'm a newbie, and but it's a heck of a lot of fun. And what a great group of guys! It's one thing I recommend to anyone when you move to a new place is to kind of get out of the expat bubble, the foreigner bubble. And, join a club wherever you may be. If you're in Japan, join a local club, like a running club or a craft club or a martial arts club. Get to know local people. It's such a great way to really make some cooler, deeper connections. My son and I were the only two non-Malaysians in this arm wrestling club, and it's just such a great group of guys. I enjoy hanging out with them. Really diverse, everything from construction workers to educators. It's neat. Oh, well. Okay, folks, that's it for this episode of the Just Japan podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Hey, wherever you are in the world, hope you're happy, hope you're healthy, and I'll be talking to you really soon.
If you got a minute to spare, don't go anywhere, stay right there, 'cause Kevin is about to speak.